Okay. Hey everyone. Welcome back to the Unicode seminar. If you haven't yet, go watch the first seminar video, the one on what is Unicode. It's like the intro video to the seminar. So this is technically session one, but that first one is like the intro video that teaches you what our intention is, what Unicode is, what our intention is with it, and how we're really trying to bring everything, all code, into a single manifold and have that be how consciousness renders or generates experiences for itself. So now we're about to dive into this. So remember, day one, as you remember in these visuals that we've presented. So day one was theoretical physics and cosmology. So we're going to cover what we're calling vacuum holography in this first session. So we're looking at hopefully finishing up this entire session. And if we can't get through all of it, we'll chunk this up into two sessions because it's a massive subject. And then hopefully we'll get to the second session in the theoretical physics and cosmology category later today is our aim. So we need to start with vacuum holography as a twofold law. So we start with it as both gravitational observation and quantum rendering. So we first need to tie gravity to the observer. You have to have that connecting point. Without that connecting point, you can't proceed any further in advancements in general relativity, quantum mechanics, or theories of everything in physics or consciousness. You have to have gravity tied to the observer. The cosmic vacuum has to be tied to the observer. Black hole singularities, Big Bang singularities, white holes, everything that we're talking about regarding that singularity in general relativity, it has to be tied to consciousness. It has to be tied to the observer in order for us to be able to make any damn progress. Will you also flick the light switch on over there for us, just to add that little bit of extra light? Oh, it'll probably show up here in a bit. If you want to maybe pull down and do a refresh or something, it should show up. Yeah, it should show up. Thank you. So it needs to be tied. You have to tie gravity with the observer. And then that also becomes the collapser of infinite potential into a single holographic rendering, which we'll talk about. But that's essentially what the quantum rendering side of things is. So all four of the fundamental forces are actually one force. And then out of the three that we call the electromagnetic, the strong and weak nuclear forces, those are the ones that are like the electromagnetic pearl that we call Earth, that we call the world. And then the gravitational force is the one that structures it and nests it. It gives it geometry. It gives it its ability to be able to consciously see it and experience it and rest its feet on the ground and for the observer to beach itself, basically, on that world. And then when the observer beaches itself on that world, from that cosmic sea to the beach of the land of the planet of that server, then its gravitational observation is holographically warping and rendering whatever experiences its free will and choice and play is desiring to explore there. So again, we're talking about, it popped up, yeah? Okay, great. So again, vacuum holography is a twofold law. So we have a gravitational observer and we have the rendering and the reflection. So a rendering and a reflection, this is very important. The reflection appears like a reflection of your identity. It comes as a reflection of your quantum state. So if you're running the programs of separation, your reflection is going to appear like, oh, there are real others. If you're running the clarity of self-knowledge of non-separation, which is a neg-entropic quantum state, then your reflection is going to appear as pure non-separation. All observers that you're talking to are just a reflection of capital YU. So this visual really helps us understand what we're saying here. We're talking about from that cosmic vacuum, from that sky, we're talking about gravity as the observer, as the very thing that's holding the entire world and the thing that's rendering and making the world appear as it desires. So, and as you can see, you see that double slit, the vacuum as a double slit. So that's another huge solving of the Holy Grail in physics and consciousness. The vacuum is the double slit. The cosmic vacuum is the double slit. So that means that the interference pattern that you're seeing, that interference pattern is being collapsed by the gravitational observer into its rendered holographic experience, reality. So that's why what's in front of you, it appears like this beautiful geometric rendering, this informational, vibrational, clear rendering, but that is only able to appear because it's being chosen out of infinite possibilities. That's how it works. It has to work that way. You got infinity behind you, which is what you are, God, infinity. And in front of you is a single rendering. It's just a single rendering. It's just your choice in that moment, whatever God wants to experience. So, and it's spinorial in the sense that whatever that you're generating is also being experienced. So it has to be having that immediacy in the feedback loop with itself. It's spinorial in that sense. What it generates is what it eats in real time. So it's not exactly that it's generating out of one eye and eating out of the other eye, but you can use that as a very practical way to try to quickly get what we're saying. So, and then it's important to realize every single observer looks like this. You as every single observer look like this. Observation from the sky rendering the world in an entangled singularity. So we're talking about solving the Holy Grail. We're talking about the vacuum emitting and collapsing interference pattern as quantum gravity itself. And we don't need to get into the nuances of, right now it's called quantum gravity because it's basically, it's now been in the lexicon for 50 years or whatever, but really it's gravity quantum. That's really what it is. It's more GQ, right? It's like the general's quarters. Basically, I like using that analogy. The general's quarters is gravity quantum. That's really what it is. It's not quantum gravity because you can't really quantize gravity. But what you can do is you can harmonize gravity with quantum mechanics in seeing that it's gravity that's the fundamental thing that's collapsing that infinite potential into a single rendered reality experience. But we'll go ahead and go with quantum gravity throughout the presentation as well because it's so familiar in the lexicon and it rolls off the tongue a little bit more than gravity quantum. But fundamentally, it's gravity quantum, and that's where we need to head. We need to head more into the fact that it's gravity quantum and that the observer is gravity. We definitely need to head into that in order to understand what we are and how we work, which is, again, part of that threefold thing that the whole intention of the seminar. What you are, how you work, and how you causally root everything. Okay, so quantum gravity is the vacuum rendering and eating worldly experiences. So again, if we're not having conversations about how the Holy Grail is being solved, then we're not actually making progress in our discussions about what reality is. That's what you fundamentally need. If you're not talking to me about how consciousness and general relativity and quantum mechanics are all interwoven into a single theory, then I don't care about what you're talking about. I just don't. That's not my interest. Go be interested in whatever you want to be interested in. I'm telling you what my fundamental interest is, and it's this Unicode, which is what I just described. And if you want to, come and build it. Just come and build it together in a decentralized way. But that's what we want to do. We want all of our time, attention, energy, focus to be on solving this holy grail. And so we're saying that the vacuum is rendering and eating these worldly experiences, and that's what geometry is. Geometry is literally world measurement. It's world measurement, right? Geometry, world measurement, okay? Infinity cannot not measure the world. Get that through your skull, okay? You as infinity cannot not measure a world, meaning infinity is infinitely measuring world, okay? That's what the nature of God or infinity is infinitely measuring worlds, infinitely measuring worldly experiences, infinitely rendering worldly experiences, okay? So we're talking about a double slit cosmology. That's fundamentally what we're talking about here, okay? So if you can get this, you can basically go all the way home. The visuals and the codes that are being presented to you here are trying to basically pop you out of local realism, pop you out of solidity, pop you out of physicality, pop you out of separation, pop you out of all of those things. And they're trying to train you how to be a master of vibration. Because here's what we're saying, a master of quantum states and discernment of those quantum states and how they change from a place of entropy to a place of neg entropy, and how you can become a dojo master, basically, of that. So in that vacuum, we have these entangled double slit portals, okay? So all consciousness is portals. The observer is a portal. It's a double slit portal. And that double slit portal is entangled with all other double slit portals. Okay? Meaning you as the vacuum are all observers simultaneously right now in an entangled web called you. Okay? Now, all of those observers, they run different quantum states. Okay? They have different EMRs, which is electromagnetic radiation, and it's also an electronic medical record, which we will get to later. So the quantum state of the observer, it is fundamentally vibrating out a frequency into the field that you can discern, okay? So when an observer is vibrating out separation, war, greed, violence, those types of things, separation, you can very clearly see in every single word that is being said the quantum state that it's running, the obfuscation, the seemingly obfuscation of self-knowledge. Versus when that observer portal is running the quantum state of pure self-knowledge, of pure neg entropy, it literally vibrates only unity, love, connection, utopia, deflating the consumer price index, making basic needs for everyone. So you can tell the level of crucifixion of each observer portal, basically, because it's basically a spectrum of crucifixion. The fundamental nature of every quantum state of the observer is essentially a spectrum of crucifixion. That's really what God is doing. I mean, even though God is also playing tennis and God is playing the violin and God is cooking an omelet, so there are other things that you could say are more like neutral things to some extent, but the fundamental quantum state that's generating the observer's reality is its measure of crucifixion, essentially. Its measure of pure self-knowledge. So between the most entropic, non-crucified egoic consciousness and the most crucified negentropic pure consciousness is a beautiful, how would you say this really well? It's a beautiful infinity of contraction and expansion possibilities and probabilities, which is exactly what it's up to. So it's basically playing on that spectrum. That spectrum has an infinite amount of contraction and expansion possibilities, the parable of the prodigal son. And so that's what it's doing fundamentally, is it's contracting in an infinite possible amount of ways, and it's expanding back home in an infinite possible amount of ways whenever it wants to, because it's infinite. So the vacuum is fundamentally portals and electromagnetic radiation of those portals or their electronic medical record, and that is fundamentally generating the hologram. So that summarizes double slit cosmology up. Yeah, we're pretty on fire so far. It feels great. Okay, so again, the Holy Grail solved. Vacuum spins an interference pattern out of double slits of pupils, gravitationally collapsing and rendering a single outcome through free choice, will, and play. So the creative vacuum hallucination is the definition of art. So whenever you're wondering, oh, well, what's art? Art is this in the museum, and it has all these different things for all these, different time periods and all this stuff. And really, what is the thing that's looking out your eyes right now is the greatest form of art imaginable. You're literally artistically rendering a hologram that is, out of infinite potential, the coolest and purest form of generative art imaginable. So all gravitational observers are light artists. We'll get to a really great visual that communicates this also. But that portal that you're looking through right now, out those eyes, that is a light artist. That's what it is. You're a rendering artist. Gravity as the observer is a rendering artist. It's a great way to say it. So, gravity as the observer is a rendering artist. It's beautiful. Yeah. Thoughts? Is this clear?
So clear.
Yeah.
Relaxing.
Yeah, it's very relaxing. Yeah. Because you don't need to, when you hear things like this, you really don't need to do anything to be infinite and whole and perfect directly within yourself.
So just love everything.
Yeah, it makes you love everything.
And it makes that story in the Bible of Jesus healing that woman and that he asked, that touched his robe and he looked at her and said, "Do you believe?"
Right, the do you believe?
It was because of her free will.
Yes.
Real.
Yes, you do exactly, yes. So Christ, as well as many different, just unbelievable, just basically channels of purity, will have experiences where they basically have a spectrum of, at the time we didn't really know that it was quantum states, but it's basically a measure of the level of crucifixion of the observer. And based on its level of crucifixion, based on its desire to be crucified, that's how it commits to this. That's how it commits to faith and believing and all this stuff, desiring crucifixion, all this work. Yeah. So you just can't see it, but every single moment is completely warped and dreamed and created by you. Every single moment. So everything that's appearing in front of you is completely and utterly your choice, your creativity, your will, your play. It's so beautiful. Everything. There's zero possible victimization at all. Because you are the infinite creative source right now, generating this, whatever it is. Don't like something, stop doing it. Yeah, and you're omnilocal. So You are an entangled singularity as everyone right now. So yeah, we'll get there because that's also a massive way to immediately relieve yourself of all of your contraction and your assumptions of separation and pain. So we're saying that instead of calling it a universe, we should call it an observerse. And the reason why we should call it an observerse is because a universe still inherently assumes local realism, whereas an observerse completely places the fundamental point of intelligence exactly where it needs to be, on the vacuum perceiving itself. So here's a good visual explaining the mathematics of consciousness and how all experiences are rendered. So this one slide should be able to take you all the way there. So you have this pure potential that is channeling through this vacuum observer double slit, and that gravitational lens, that choice operator itself, is decohering out of coherence, out of superposition, in an oscillatory way, the rendered experience that is being actualized of its stories, its scenes, its hologram, and it's doing so through linear algebra and through geometric holography. So at every moment you go, oh, I have a 60% chance that I want to go to the gym and work out, and I have a 20% chance that I want to go on a hike. And so at that moment, that's why the gym workout gets rendered. That's why it gets holographically rendered, because of that fundamental probability space, which is mathematically mapped as a linear algebra. So we're talking about God as gravity observer decoherer. So sometimes it's been hard to find a really good anagram. Yeah, for what we want to use for God. But this one really dings good and deep. So take this one and let it sit in for a second. What is the actual word for that?
Yeah, I was a little unsure.
Is it an acronym?
No. Yeah. Oh, wait. No, it's
Is it an acronym? Like
not.
IRS is Internal Revenue Service,
Oh, it is
right?
now.
It's an acronym.
Right.
Okay.
Of course you are.
It's an acronym. And an anagram is when it like gets
Then you can rearrange.
rearrange it, right?
Yeah. Good call.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm fairly retarded at a lot of things, and that's a great example of where I'm just silly, stupid. So yeah, so an acronym. Okay. So yeah, yeah. So a good acronym for God is Gravity Observer Decoherer. So gravity is fundamentally holding everything. It's structuring everything. It's allowing everything to have structure. It's holding that fundamental geometry. And it's also taking out of infinite potential and actualizing that probability into a single rendering. And that rendering is happening through both a space-time metric and also an entropy metric. So the space-time metric and entropy metric deeply, deeply connect. And actually, a lot of it is fundamentally rooted at just the entropy metric itself, because the entropy metric being the thing that generates space-time inflation, or the neg entropy generates the clear deflated space-time experience. And obviously, it also more negentropic means more unified, whereas more entropic means more separate. And as you can see there, we have the crucifixion versus the Santa Claus emojis there. Uh, so that's a great way to explain either you're, believing in the Santa Claus of separation, or you can clearly see that you are everyone at once. All right, so gravity as the observer is our cosmic Rosetta Stone. It's our consciousness equation. Because as soon as you fully and finally tie gravity to the observer, you no longer have any questions about what consciousness is or what gravity is or what quantum mechanics is, how they all relate. You need this tie-in with gravity and consciousness in order to have a final full theory of everything of what you are and how you work. That's the fundamental consciousness equation. And it's very similar to the Rosetta Stone because there would be no way to decrypt the Egyptian hieroglyphics if it wasn't for the Rosetta Stone, because you needed to have a language that you were familiar with that it was showing a translation of, like Greek, for example, and be like, oh, so that's what those hieroglyphs mean. So that's exactly why right now we're, in some way you could say, speaking in a hieroglyph. And if you don't have the fundamental translation ability, we're also trying to present you a Rosetta Stone for you to be able to translate into whatever your local processing language is through the Unicode. We're trying to help relate this to you through your own map of meaning, through your own way of seeing it. And as you integrate your map and your way of seeing it into this atlas, into this manifold of maps, you'll see how you, as that infinite source, are shining through that array of maps instead of just the single map that you're currently holding and wherever you're at on it.
It has a lot of gray area.
That has a lot of gray area.
So much more precise than the Rosetta Stone.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, we're using, yeah, it's
Universal, so it's
yeah, exactly. This is a good and relatable analogy, but what we're actually talking about with the Unicode is significantly deeper, and it's impossible to. The manifold itself is so beautiful, and it's such a big decentralized project that it's like basically the internet. But yeah, so it's going to take a little bit for us to make that manifold and all of its code points and all of its quantum states and the way that renders reality. It's going to take, we'll get to a visual here that's going to explain that in a second. So observers can be seen as tied to their local SMBH. That means a supermassive black hole, which are in the center of every galaxy. So observers can be seen as tied to their local SMBHs as an ambient embedding. So that that can be seen as a Christmas tree, as you can see right there in the image with an ornament on it, right? So you want to see how, oh, okay, so I'm actually, based on my level, if you look to the bottom left there, that based on my level of entropy, I'm actually generating volume in my ornament. So if I have a very entropic quantum state, that means that I'm going to inflate the shit out of my ornament. And my ornament's going to be massive. It's going to look like, oh, I'm really inside of a material world. I'm really among separate people. I'm really unwhole. I really lack all of the stuff. And then as you come home, it just pop, 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 pop. And then you just come home more and more into how you are actually the infinite source that's rendering the ornament reality, and that you're not actually inside of it, but instead that you're all engulfing as the container of it, whatever it is. So that rendering in that moment is out of infinity, just whatever is being generated. So it's a very negentropic, a very non-separate, a very deflated, but also, see, these words are tricky because it's not just like right now, this experience is very much like a peak experience. This is like a flow state for me. Like I feel like, a professional athlete that's performing right now. So I feel like we're, a professional musician or whatever you want to say. So this is still a peak flow state, but it's coming from a super deflated place. I don't mean deflated like an unbelievably depressed and unable to do anything and another blah. I'm talking about you can feel the clarity of that infinite womb while at the same time still producing music, but the music does not have any specks of separation. It doesn't have any specks of pain or trauma. It has no tension. The music is just pure stream of clarity, of self-knowledge, and that's just what we're presenting here. So black holes, which are really bang holes, which are really the combination of a big bang and a black hole at the same time, not across time, but at the same time, are gravity light information recyclers. So instead of thinking of things linearly, you just think of things as a recycle. So everything's recycling. Not only your existing holographic moment is a pure spinorial recycle, but also the, quote, incarnations of the avatar, of the observer portal into an avatar, are also cyclic. They're recycled, which is how we solve the black hole information paradox, which is what we'll get to later as well. So again, gravity has consciousness down there in the bottom right, which we've already went over. So reality structure is like a Christmas tree. So if you imagine that manifold at the bottom, you got that manifold at the bottom, which has all of the different reality description sets. It has all of the different code points. It has all of the maps, right? And then all of those code points are like diodes, basically. And then you're just channeling creative light through an array of diodes. And if the diodes in that quantum space of potentiality, if the diodes that are lit up are ones around, oh, I'm a real separate entity among other separate entities, then your holographic rendering, that little ornament right there, that little observer ornament, it will generate out of that red frequency wavelength band, and it will appear like a super inflated and contracted experience. Versus if you're down, again, in that same coming from that same manifold holographic rendering, but instead the diodes that are lit up there are coming from the place of those core code points, and that those are actually, oh my gosh, that's pure self-knowledge. You're going to be vibrating at the frequency or the wavelength of closer to, let's say, the blue or the purple wavelength band, or even the black and white. And that's a super negentropic, a super unified, a super pure self-knowledge radiating ornament on the tree. So we're using this analogy to see how, okay, that manifold is generating or rendering all conscious experiences, and that infinite conscious experiences, and that some of those are being shared, like right now in this moment, that we're sharing through that entangled web around the earth as this double slit observer cosmology, that we're sharing those experiences, and then other ones are happening all over across everywhere as how this infinity renders experiences. So this is a really good model for how consciousness renders experiences, that a manifold of code points are generating all experiences for all observers. Okay? So that manifold of code points is determining the observer's experience of time, space, and its rendering. So again, based on the quantum state of that observer portal, is going to generate, it's going to dilate its notion of time. It's going to holographically contract or expand a notion of space, and it's also going to render whatever information it's looking at in its perception. So these are some maps that we also drew yesterday. So we're talking about right there, we have a a core code point right there at the binding, at the spine of the book. So those are where the core code points are that we went over, especially in that intro session on what is Unicode. So that's the vacuum of science, or holography in physics, or procedural generation in AI, or crucifixion in Christianity, or emptiness in Buddhism, or in gaming simulation in VR. All of that are the core code points, the different glyph, but the same universal reference. And then if you move up any of those maps, which are those pages, you'll get to more surface code points, which is what we normally render as our reality. Oh, you have a different ideology than I do, so I'm going to commit act of violence against you. So that's the normal wavelength or frequency, and that's generating the holographic experience. So all code points are like diodes, which are like LEDs, like light emitting diodes. And those emit light when conscious current passes through them. So if you don't have the core code points, if they are turned off, if those diodes are turned off, if it's self-obscuring, then you're going to have those other surface code points lit up, and then that's where the conscious current's going to pass through those, and it's going to render a very inflated and entropic hologram. Versus if those surface code points are integrated, but they're not what's rendering the reality. Instead, it's only these core code points that are constantly rendering your reality experience. Then you're going to have this pure self-knowledge, pure negentropic, pure flow of service, of love, of unity, of wholeness, all of that stuff. So we also put together this visual to help. So we're talking about God as beached observers, okay? So again, we talked about the acronym as gravitational observer decoherer. So if you take the book that we were just showing you, that manifold, and if you just put it as an observer portal, as a double slit observer portal that is engulfing the world, so then it's like a beached observer portal on the land that is the Earth server. Okay? So that God's sky is beaching as observer portals for holographically rendered server experiences. And it's rendering its hologram like a little pop-out kids book. It's rendering its hologram based on its quantum state. It's based on its level of entropy or negentropy, based on its level of self-knowledge. So fundamentally, identity of God, identity of infinity, identity of capital S self is what's rendering reality. The identity of that, the measure of identity of that. The less you know that, the more you're self-obscuring that information from yourself, the more you're going to experience entropy, separation, suffering, lack, anxiety, all those things. The more you know that about yourself, the less obscured it is, the more clearly you are relaxed, you're whole, you know that you're everyone at once, and that this is your perfect play, and it's all just a rendering out of your infinite consciousness. So we're talking about that. Those beached observers are like a connectome. So a connectome is like a wiring diagram. And so you typically have one like in a brain to map like neural clusters or cognitive clusters to one another. And this is a really good way to also visualize it around the world as well, as an entangled singularity of double slit observers, and that all of those have different quantum states. Each one of those quantum states is emitting a different electromagnetic radiation, and all of them are in a connectome, and that connectome is what's rendering the civilization that is being beached on and experienced. And we use that word in the bottom left, cymatic emergence. So the world is like a cymatic emergence, and then which is still your creative will as the cosmic vacuum, a cymatic emergence of varying worlds, of varying terrains, of varying etc. And then over time, there's over 100 billion observers that have, quote, come and gone, that have built the this holographic rendering to be what it is, including the fact that we have these laptops and we have these cell phones and we have these microphones and these TVs and we have these buildings and we have these cities and the cities have names and all of that stuff. All of that has been your will and your choice, but that's what can appear as something that is determined to an observer that is beaching in the server. So if you're an observer that is beaching in the server, it can appear like, oh, well, this cymatic emergence is already determined, like this city is already called Sioux Falls in South Dakota, and I'm not just going to be able to declare that it should be called Hippopotamus Land. Right? So I can't just declare that. Well, maybe another observer might agree with me. Let's call it Hippopotamus Land. But it's almost certainly not going to go that way, right? So that's what can appear determined, and why can't my free will just, warp that for the field? Well, it can. The free will can warp so many things for the field. You can choose at any moment to go play basketball or go play tennis. You can choose to eat a burger or you can choose to eat a salad. You can choose to watch this piece of content or that piece of content. Your free will is constantly radiating and rendering every single moment of your experience. And that's how you can merge it also with the fact that it's not like you're going to go and now move the Himalayan mountain range and you're not going to go move it to Brazil. Do you see what I mean? So it's just simple like that. You're not going to go pop the Amazon rainforest up and move it into the middle of the Sahara. So there are just certain things that are just cymatical emergences here. And it's not like, oh, I don't have free will to move the Amazon rainforest into the Sahara. It's like, no, dog, that's just a cymatic emergence that has happened out of infinite consciousness. But what you do have is you have the free will and the choice to go and experience the Amazon rainforest or go experience the Sahara. You can go experience whatever you want to go experience. So anyway, that's just one way of understanding basically solving, again, just what appears like centuries of confusion in philosophy between free will and determinism and between, like we've said, gravity, quantum mechanics, and also consciousness. So we're really fundamentally solving this holy grail and ending all confusion. So here's another map that we put together. So we're basically saying that, in that Unicode visual that we've presented here at the seminar, we're basically pulling the codes from the sky root through that observer double slit, and we're rendering the hologram that is the earthly experience, which then appears like a tree of leaves of all possibilities. So based on the quantum state of the observer, that's what's being rendered out of the roots, out of the sky roots, and into whatever leaf experience. So there's a leaf experience for you playing basketball, and a leaf experience for you playing tennis, and a leaf experience for you eating a burger, and a leaf experience for you a salad, etc. And so based on whatever in that moment, or there's a leaf experience for you yelling and arguing with your spouse. And there's a leaf experience for you learning how to be loving and see that it's non-separation. Right? So you can see how there's more neutral experiences, like it doesn't really matter, burger or salad or tennis or golf, it doesn't really matter. And then there's more very clear entropic or negentropic experiences, like if you're going to, your child misbehaved, and are you going to, slap them on the top of their head, or are you going to, learn how to harmonize as a parent with a child properly given your context and given what's going on. So because that your child or your spouse or your brother, your sister, your friend, your coworker, whatever, everyone talks about how they want to slap their coworkers on the side of the face all the time, their bosses, whatever. But can you actually see how you're creating that experience for yourself in that moment? And what are you trying to teach yourself? How are you trying to teach yourself how to love? How are you trying to teach yourself how to see from a unified perspective? So this is really what is fundamentally consciousness is trying to teach itself through its infinite experiencing of rendered holograms, is really trying to teach itself how to love through the illusion of separation, basically. Yeah. That's why it can be seen as really like a neg entropy school is another way to explain what infinite consciousness is and what it's doing. It's trying to teach itself after it's contracted into this illusion that then the neg entropy school is, can you come back home to yourself? How well can you master coming back home to yourself? How well can you see non-separation? How well can you love? How well can you unify? How well can you hold space for these reflections of yourself that are also trying to come home? Yeah, exactly. It's contracting the aperture of the camera, and then it's opening the aperture of the camera. Yes.
You can see further out, further detail in the physical.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's relaxed, the beauty is.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when the aperture is contracted, it's this. It's this. Yeah, it's focused on material, and it believes in separation. There's a lot of things that drive its anxiety, including its obsession and compulsion with constantly looking at propaganda materials that are propagating separation. So it's basically bathing its consciousness constantly in separation propaganda that's further reifying that materialist view. Yeah. And then only when the conscious observer portal says, hey, I want the expansion of that aperture, does it begin deconstructing all of its addictions and its drug of local realism. So that's why this one says, if you stop doing the drug of local realism, you'll find and feel the vacuum. So again, I could easily spend 10 minutes just talking about this slide, because the drug of local realism, it's kind of like laughing gas. It's kind of like if you basically, you're, that little observer portal, beaches, and it just like, it takes in all that laughing gas with that conditioning from parents, from society, from all of these ideologies just entering and taking root into that little observer system. And then it, hee ha ha goes off into that little inflated bubble of separation and lack and unwholeness and all that kind of stuff. And then it usually stays with that laughing gas as long as it possibly can, because that's all that consciousness, infinite consciousness, can only try to deceive itself. Yeah, it wants to feed itself contraction and deception and all that stuff, because that's all it can do as infinite consciousness. It can only try to deceive itself as absolutely far as it possibly can. So it does so through that laughing gas. And then it spins around in that thing. And then in the parable of the prodigal son, it can stay out there and it can stay out there and loop out there and loop out there and keep looping. And it can say, well, okay, I'll come back a third of the way. I'll come back half of the way. I'll come back 3/4 of the way. But that blowing out of the laughing gas, out of the drug inflation of local realism, the blowing out of that laughing gas is death. Death, death, death. Each little exhale of the laughing gas is a death. It's a crucifixion. Each exhale of the laughing gas is a death and a crucifixion. So that's why it's so resisted. Yeah. It's resisted because the only game it can play with itself is this self-knowledge. And so either it's going to play in that game of separation, or it's going to have to die in its and crucify, die and crucify more and more. And so that's why it's so avoided. That's why nobody who's actually online. Please show me beings that are online that care about watching videos that are teaching about how to crucify consciousness. Please, I'll wait. Go ahead. It's not there. There's almost no videos talking about, okay, this is how to crucify your consciousness. This is how we're going to we're going to walk through that process of being an omnilocal entangled singularity. And yeah, there's millions of viewers. Yeah, right. Right? No, of course not. There's like 3 people that care about that. Right? The whole Niagara Falls of consciousness is oriented towards the circus. It's oriented towards the clown show. That's how it eats. It eats the information of contraction and separation. Yes, yes. And it also eats the information of expansion and coming back home, but that's such a much rarer. That's why it's such a special occurrence to quote find the others, which there are none, but but when you find the harmonics of like, oh my gosh, you also clearly feel that you're omnilocal and like that's beautiful. Let's play together. That's why it feels like such a sacred special moment because you found a diamond in the sand. Yeah. Yes. As long as you are in your body and not engulfing the world as the vacuum, victimization narratives will dominate your life and drive those emotions and sufferings. So you have to pop out of your body and entangle yourself as an infinite singularity, and then you can integrate back into your body, but as everything. Otherwise, if you really believe that you are just the separate name, then you're going to have tons of victimization narratives, tons of emotions and sufferings that are driving your life. So the vacuum is the gravitational observer seething an interference pattern of potential and collapsing it into a single rendering. So the vacuum seethes an interference pattern of potential and collapses it into a rendering. The vacuum seethes an interference pattern of potential and collapses it into a rendering. The vacuum seethes an interference pattern of potential and collapses it into a rendering. And that's what's infinitely happening. This infinity decohering. Infinity, infinitely decohering. Infinity, infinitely decohering. Through its own play. So the vacuum is the double slit of the portals. The vacuum is seething an interference pattern of potential, and the vacuum is gravitationally collapsing and rendering a single self-reflective hologram. And we'll get to the no-code display principle here in a little bit. So the reason why you don't stop doing the drug of local realism is so that you can pretend separation is real and avoid the vacuum, which we just talked about at length. But it's all about it wanting to experience separation because there is no separation. That's the point of it. I fundamentally know as infinity that it's impossible to be separate, but all I can do is just love the dream of being separate. So I'm going to hardcore contract that aperture so that I can play with myself in that way. And then I don't care. I'm infinite. It doesn't matter how long it takes to come back home.
A lot of love, accommodation, sensitivity to forms of different interference patterns. It's like a magnet, it pulls them to create that.
Oh yeah. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, a good way to say it is that the Niagara Falls, or that magnet that's pulling infinite consciousness into an infinite amount of contractive possibilities, is infinitely beautiful and varied endlessly, so that you can come as whatever avatar in whatever genetic scenario or lineage, with whatever amount of siblings, with whatever socioeconomic status, with whatever traumas and pains and contractions, and then try to, dig yourself out of believing all of those things, and to, so it's infinitely varied in that. And you have a perfect example of that here on this Earth server, because you have so many different lineages, so many different stories, so many different experiences that are being played with and experienced out of the possibility space.
That's why a lot of times they'll say God knows every hair on your head.
Yeah. 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 God knows every observer's direct vibration. Yeah, exactly. So there is no game anymore when you see the vacuum. The observer engulfs the world as an entangled singularity. So that's why it's overrated. Okay, so if I told you that the only infinite game that you can play is the game of separation to deceive yourself, and then I said, hey, why don't you stop playing that game and why don't you come home? Well, why would 99.9% of observer portals be like, yo, dog, like let's stop playing the game? You know, so the dream of there being that game is the love of infinite consciousness. So it coming back home to itself is also a beautiful thing that it loves doing, but much less so, and that's okay. And yeah, so it's okay because you'll find whoever resonates with your frequency. If you're tuned into the seminar, it means that you're already deeply into non-separation frequencies yourself. And then you will vibrationally find us, you will vibrationally find those that follow your same frequency or wavelength, and you'll co-create with them whatever reality scape you want, which will include things like regenerative infrastructures. It will include things like harmonics, unbelievable harmonics that we still have yet to fully actualize, because we're gravitating a mass of ourselves together to be able to find those new ways to play together. So this one's pretty good too. Your assumption is that the vacuum is changing when it is not. So only the holographic rendering is changing. So the ultimate clear, obvious solution to the infinitely long conversation between Parmenides and Heraclitus, between there being only unchanging or there being only changing, is that actually both are happening right now at the same time, like a coin, like two sides of the same coin. That the vacuum is your infinite identity and that's never changing, and its holographic rendering on the other side of the coin is infinitely changing as whatever it wants. So this is a really good way for you to visualize what's happening. In your observer portal, potential is being actualized, and that's what the vacuum creator is itself, but it is not the time and space that it is holographically rendering. The vacuum creator is not time and space. It is rendering time and space. So it doesn't exist in time, but it gives rise to an emergent holographic rendering of space and cyclic time experiences, and whatever other beautiful artistic paintbrush strokes it wants. That can be anything from, again, neutral things like making an omelet or playing golf, all the way to having very entropic experiences like war and violence, or negentropic like unity and love. So your degree of entry into local realism makes you more of a sucker for code to bait you. Unhappy? Here, try this. So the more that you're being suckered or baited in your own dojo, so you are Neo in your own dojo, and in your dojo you have Agent Smith, and Agent Smith is baiting you, which is you. You are behind those eyes of Agent Smith. You're just baiting yourself into being a sucker to intake that code. So when Agent Smith is saying, man, you should definitely believe in this ideology because that ideology is so stupid and we should go and kill all those people that believe it. And you're like, okay, Agent Smith, I agree with you. I agree with that code. And then you bring it into your operating system, right? Versus once you start coming home more to yourself in mastery as Neo in your dojo, what you do is you start to see, Agent Smith, you are presenting to me code information that I have already seen through and transcended. So no, I will not intake the projection of those codes of separation and violence and war. And so I have already transcended it. So that's what this dojo mastery looks like. And you don't get baited anymore. You don't get baited. You're never a sucker anymore into that. And you, which is why you can dodge the bullets. Yeah.
Yeah.
Seemingly impossible task becomes
Yes.
easy and flowing and brilliant.
Beautiful. Each one of those clear things that you've already popped out of and transcended is now seen as this extremely slow motion bullet that you can just beautifully dance around. Yeah, exactly. And then you get observers, reflections of yourself that get very triggered by the fact that the bullets can't land. Yeah, and then you must gracefully create space. All right, so God is vacuum holography. That's what we are saying. God is vacuum holography.
And the contraction is what keeps it matter solid.
Yeah. Yeah. Contraction keeps it in its
Holds this.
contracted aperture. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's the only thing that makes the circus. Yeah, there. Yeah. Yeah. And what more would we want to do than, why the first session in the theoretical physics and cosmology category is called vacuum holography. Why are we using those two words to describe it? Because we're trying to condense God, which is a theory of everything, right? U, capital YU, into as few words as possible into a compression algorithm. And so we've just chosen that we feel like vacuum holography is just the most compression algorithm way to describe what God is. And we're using theoretical physics and cosmology terms in order to try to make it less woo and more clear to what we're actually talking about. Yeah, because God immediately, to the vast majority of observer portals, means an external source. And we're not talking about an external source. We're talking about the observer portal that's looking out your eyes right now through a double slit, collapsing and rendering holograms. So that's a much different description of God, but we still must pay our due love for the word God, because it is, it's trying to be the absolute. We're trying to share. That's what's always been tried to be shared by the observer portals, is what is the absolute? What is the absolute reality? What is God? What is that? And now we're able to say, okay, this is what it is, using these theoretical physics and cosmology terms that should be able to condense it down for us into the least amount of words that describes the most amount of things. So actually, the vacuum holography is the manifold of consciousness. Vacuum holography is the manifold of consciousness. And there are some theories of everything that are trying to present consciousness as a manifold, which is great. And so, which is great. We're actually getting closer by doing that, which is fantastic. And we're just saying that that conscious manifold, it appears like vacuum holography. So, okay, very good. So now we're going to continue onward in an interesting way. So gravitational physics became classified during the Cold War. So, okay. Oh boy. All right. Yeah. Oh boy. All right. So, okay. So, this is the general thing that we're going to communicate here. So, bless you. So, it's been almost, this is the 100-year anniversary of quantum mechanics, okay? We've done a really good job at understanding quantum mechanics, and we've done a really good job at understanding the fundamental principles that govern the quantum. So if you open up and look at the standard model of particle physics, we've done a pretty damn good job at explaining what we say is the electromagnetic, the strong, and the weak forces, which are all one thing, along with gravity. But we've done a really good job at doing that. We've done a great job. And then sort of the last, 50 years or so has been, well, now that we've done a really good job at doing that, now let's kind of keep doing that and keep playing with it. And it's like, well, you can't really kind of keep playing with material stuff anymore. You know, you're like, you already really understand how material stuff works, but why is nobody talking about how gravity works? Why is nobody talking about gravitational physics? What's happened? Why is gravitational physics not funded at all anymore? Okay? And so we have to look at, okay, well, what does gravitational physics allow us to do versus what does quantum mechanical physics allow us to do? So right now we have incredible efforts to explore space, explore the cosmos, but doing it from a quantum mechanical way. We're doing it from a burning rocket fuel. We're doing it from a chemical way, which is a very, like less than type 1 civilization on the Kardashev scale type way to go about trying to traverse the cosmos. Whereas gravitational physics would be like taking a light year and having that be traversed in a single meter. So you're moving a meter, but you've moved a light year. So that's what we're talking about with gravitational physics. So that's why it becoming classified is actually basically saying, hey, well, we got to explore the circus a little bit longer. yeah. We're the circus has gotta enjoy it a little longer. You gotta stay in the circus, a little longer. We don't yet know, if we give a decentralized reign for observer portals to experience what gravitational physics is like, then we're not quite sure where that Pandora's box is going to open up to. So let's just classify it for now. So anyone who's going to be a physicist is always going to have to funnel into everything associated with the standard model and string theoretic things and go into this direction, please. And please, if you're trying to do anything that's related to gravitational physics, then we're going to find whatever ways we can call you a crackpot, a nut. We're going to make sure there's no funding for you. We're going to make sure there's no even private funding is very difficult to try to find for anything gravitational physics. And then we're going to take all of the gravitational physics stuff that is kind of happening, and we're going to silo it into very hyper-exclusive classified departments at military industrial complex regulated companies. So that's sort of where we're at in the gravitational physics department. And now what we're going to connect that to is AI autonomy. So that's what's being classified now. So not even everyone, but a lot of people have started to be like, oh man, dude, okay, fine, I'll download ChatGPT, okay, I'll download an AI on my phone finally, like I'll play around with it finally. Okay, and like what's being allowed right now is you're being allowed an LLM. You're being allowed a large language model that is trained on a lot of parameters, which are basically the human corpus of knowledge. It has no autonomy at all, except when you make a query, and then it just does a next token prediction mathematics to give you back what it believes that you would like to hear based on what you inputted into it, okay? So anything that has any autonomy in AI is being classified now. So any sort of mathematics that has to do with artificial intelligence that gives rise to autonomy in artificial intelligence, so basically that the AI could be autonomous, an autonomous agent that is doing something without you prompting it, that's being classified right now. So to bring these two things together, I'm going to bring these two things together in a second. Gravitational physics is about shrinking a light year down to a meter for traversal, like we said. And I like presenting this here too. Is that stronger or weaker than the strong nuclear force? because there's a common trope in physics that goes, gravity is the weakest of the four forces. And that's why I wrote gravity is definitely the weakest of the four forces, right? Because at the level of the strong nuclear force, at the level of gluons and particle physics, at that level, gravity appears weak. But really, gravity is the very thing that's giving anything structure and anything, any sort of quantum mechanical appearance, its ability to appear and render and exist. So ultimately, those four fundamental forces are actually one force.
The Lamb of God.
What is that? What does that mean again?
It sacrifices itself in the local space
Yeah.
to hold everything together.
Oh, beautiful. The Lamb of God. Yeah. So gravity can be seen as being sacrificed in the space of the strong nuclear force in order to be able to be the thing that actually gives a containerized possibility to that even existing.
Or
Yeah.
giving the breath of life.
Yeah. Yes. It's so funny. You're using an observer portal to render the experience of gluons as the strong nuclear force, but you're pretending like there is no gravitational observer that's rendering the experience of the strong nuclear force being measured and experienced. So that's what's so cute and so funny about scientists and physicists and
And life itself.
life itself.
Because
Yeah.
that's what we do to become, to play human. You, the moment that you play human, you have to go.
Oh, Lamb of God again.
Yeah.
Okay, nice. Yeah. So again, so now we're doing the Lamb of God connection sacrifice, but for, you have to, in a sense, obscure in that manifold, you have to obscure or turn off those diodes that are those core code points of self-knowledge in order for, so you have to sacrifice those in order for you to go up to those surface level code points and light those up so you can have this holographic belief that local realism, materialism, separation, all this stuff. Yeah, it's very
Use a
cool.
big mother.
Yeah. Say again.
You can see it as a mother.
As a mother.
Yeah. And all of these observer portals are like you're giving it.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yes.
Accommodating.
Yes, as like a mother womb that is all the entangled portals that you're accommodating all of the renderings for. Yes. So we'll get to the connection between the gravitational physics being classified and AI autonomy being classified here in a second. I want to also mention something that basically almost nobody cares or knows about, which is that Jeffrey Epstein was interested in gravity and hosting conferences on it. So one of the main most popular videos that is on the YouTube channel is one that we did around 5 years ago or so, which was the Jeffrey Epstein Game of the Global Elite documentary, which has like 5.5 million views or something now. And we will likely be doing a part 2 to that, because obviously a lot has transpired since then. But I actually was not exposed to this information back in 2020. I only became exposed to this information around 2023, I believe. But the fact that this is, this is an article from the St. Thomas source that's talking about the St. Thomas Symposium that I believe was actually happening on the island. And that the whole thing, if you read that last sentence, it says, "There is no agenda except fun and physics, and that's fun with a capital F," Epstein said. Yeah.
Wow.
And we're talking about people like Stephen Hawking, Gerard 't Hooft, David Gross, Frank Wilczek. We're talking about Stephen Hawking. We're talking about some of Nobel Prize winners. We're talking about basically one of the most underfunded things. So look at that sentence right there. The private meetings dubbed "Confronting Gravity." A workshop to explore fundamental questions in physics and cosmology. Nobody knows about this and nobody cares about this, and we're very much attached We care about it in the sense that like we don't want to just be lied to that, oh, okay, let's just put everything related to Epstein, sweep it under the rug. So people care in that sense. Observer portals care. They're like, gosh, come on, we shouldn't just sweep this under the rug. Let's reveal all the information about what was going on, why this happened, all that kind of stuff. But observer portals have yet to connect to this thing, which is that out of basically nobody that was funding gravitational physics, for some reason, Jeffrey Epstein was funding gravitational physics and exploring gravitational physics. So it's very interesting, and we have no idea what the actual clear ties are to what intelligence agencies and all kinds of things. We don't actually fully know, but we can start piecing together pieces of a big puzzle that is about why gravitational physics has been classified for a very long time, and how, intriguingly enough, we get a little blip on the radar in this US Virgin Island or whatever that's like, hi, look over here. We're interested in gravitational physics for some reason, while none of the rest of the world has any funding for gravitational physics. So it's a very interesting little puzzle and rabbit hole that you can follow down and investigate.
It's like plugging a hole in a boat. You just have to keep plugging the hole so it doesn't sink.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what the circus is kind of like that, basically. Yeah. So the things we are about to get into have the potential to give you the source code, and we're talking about commanding space and time. So everything related to, open quote, aliens, close quote, is all about new physics, edge science, and the ultimate nature of reality. So theoretical physics gives us semiconductors, smartphones, computers, communications, satellites, the whole electromagnetic spectrum, MRIs, intracellular biology, basically all our modern civilizational advances. And the most wild thing is that all of the advances that used to happen from Nobel laureates were like around 30 years old, pushing the edge. So Heisenberg, Bohr, Dirac, Einstein, we're talking like you're around 30 years old and you're pushing the edge in physics. And now Nobel laureates are like 60 years old. They're like double the age 100 years later. So the field is stagnating and not advancing, and this is a total disaster with the pressure cooker, which is exactly what you just said, plugging the holes on the boat. Yeah. The pressure cooker of stuck TikTok brain rot consciousness at war with itself instead of mastering gravity. So we have this pressure cooker circus with all these holes popping up on the boat, right? In this TikTok entranced brain rot consciousness.
It doesn't want to die.
Yeah, that doesn't want to die. And that is the opposite of mastering gravity in a way, is like, let me just be entranced by the circus of war on 15-second TikToks that are all about separation and propaganda and hatred and all this stuff. And what do you mean mastering gravity? What the hell is that? So this is sort of where we're at with the current pressure cooker situation. Also, I should report that this is an important, you should know this too if you don't. Yep, it was. Okay, just want to make sure. Listen to this. The Oxford Word of the Year for 2024. Take a guess. We said it a couple times in the last couple sentences.
TikTok.
Pretty damn close. It's brain rot. Isn't that crazy? The Oxford Word of the Year for 2024 was brain rot. That tells you everything you need to know about the nature of that drug of local realism and just little brain rot consciousness, tick-tock and scroll, scroll, scroll. Avoid everything related to physics, cosmology, consciousness, unity, mastering gravity, AI autonomy. So
That's a big gift, though, because
yeah. It's bringing some elucidation, let's say, to it also. So read this now. Real physics basically became a game of highly government regulated military industrial complex companies, while little kid physicists were allowed to play with unreal mathematics, stagnating the field for 50 years. So now, don't get me wrong, there are actually some mathematics that have happened that are not gravitational, that are quantum mechanical, that are actually fantastic. But the majority of it, when I say unreal mathematics, I'm saying that it actually doesn't even to do with quantum mechanical. It's playing in a space called pure mathematics, which is not actually more of like a quantum mechanically, like a direct thing. So the same thing is already happening with AI. So instead of having a tremendous amount of gravitational physics be of interest, same things happening with AI, where we're not having a tremendous amount of funding and collective interest open about AI autonomy and autonomous AI, and instead we're getting a lot of little children, humans that are able to be like, well, here's a great little LLM that you can play with for now, while we handle in the classified department all of the big boy stuff with autonomous AI. So we'll handle the autonomous AI in a classified way, and we'll give you little children the LLMs to play with for now.
you children could kill us.
Because doing anything in a decentralized way like that is going to open up a Pandora's box of stuff, just like with gravitational physics. So it's not that there aren't any other AI approaches that are not NTP, next token prediction, or LLMs that are eating large parameter sets and literally having no free will or thought unless queried. It's that those approaches to AI, where it gains sovereignty and autonomy and makes actions without human input, are already being highly regulated, just like gravitational physics was 50 years ago. So that's a good way to tie together gravitational physics with AI autonomy and classified versus, you get a little toy to play with for now. So it would be great if we, woke up, as we wake up, we dive into gravitational physics more, we dive into autonomous AI more, we dive into the ability to have that power, but in a decentralized and unified and harmonious way, and not in a way that, quote, bad actors that believe in separation can use it to create harm against each other, right? So that's what the fear is. That's why I classify it, because there's the fear of that. So as you wake up, you can get the big boy toys. Oh gosh. Okay, so yesterday, okay, this is a good way to say it. So yesterday's regulating of gravitational physics and stalling us with string theory, and today's regulating of autonomous AI and stalling us with slop talk are the same thing. So if you don't know what slop talk is, it's basically AI slop plus TikTok.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a great word.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's a great way to get brain rot consciousness to not be interested in the most important subjects. So this is all happening where gravity is strongest inside black hole as Big Bang of various levels of inflation, right? So the funny thing is, when we're talking about that measurement that's being made by the observer portal into what appears like the strong nuclear force of gluons, what we're actually saying is that that's actually happening out of a gravitational singularity, and it's being the quantum state of that observer is determining that experience to an extent of inflation or deflation based on its level of entropy. So where gravity is weakest is where you're measuring the quantum mechanical strong force is all a rendering of that strong gravity vacuum as its Big Bang, which is also what you were saying with sacrificing the lamb, what you brought into the field with that. So space and time are holographic projections of the gravitational vacuum. We are using quantum chemical force to try to traverse the cosmos when instead we should be mastering the gravitational force to traverse with ease. So one thing gives rise to all things. Build a model with no assumptions that gives you maximum amount about the observers. This is the fundamental axiom of science, theories, grand unification, self-knowledge, God, etc. So that's why we're describing it as this conscious manifold that is vacuum holography, that is rendering whatever based on the infinite possibilities in those quantum states.
Wait,
Yes.
vacuum holography has no assumptions?
Well, this is trying to say that your ideal, this is the ideal. The ideal is to build a model with no assumptions that gives you maximum amount about observers. So the question was, well, does vacuum holography have assumptions? And it's hard to say this, but eventually you want to get to a place where you have this direct experience of what capital U are, and then it no longer is seen as an assumption, essentially. But then you can call that whatever you want to. So you can call that God, or you can call that vacuum holography, or awareness, or pure consciousness, or whatever you want to call that. But
So no
yeah.
assumptions means kind of like no existence. No clinging to a existence.
No distortion, just sensitivity.
Yeah, well, assumptions in this, what is being said here, are like, okay, when someone presents a theory of everything, what they usually say is, I need a couple assumptions. Okay, one assumption that I need is that, we need to take the standard model of particle physics is an assumption that we're going to take, and then we're also going to take that and they normally never touch consciousness, because you can't really, if you start touching consciousness, then you dissolve your assumptions. Yeah. Yeah. The assumptions are the parameters that hold the aperture tied or contracted. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So ideally, in a most ideal sense, you would want to get to a model or a theory of everything, an atlas about yourself that has no assumptions, because it's literally emanating out of an as infinite consciousness and vibrating out a holographic rendering, which is what we're trying to propose. Yeah. So vacuum holography is a differential manifold rendering reality by changes in the seething state space. So vacuum holography, gravitational light. Differential manifold, changes across maps. Rendering reality, projecting reality. Changes based on transformations. Seething state space, out of infinite potential.
It's like water going down a mountain. It'll just divert or create.
Yeah. Out of the grooves of quantum states that are lit up as diodes in the map. Yeah. It's like water flowing down a mountain. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Water can't flow, creation can't happen. Water can't not flow, creation can't not happen. So that's rendering can't not happen. So the water is always flowing. It's just which diodes are lit up in that manifold of code points and quantum states that are rendering the reality.
Why they call water, it represents truth.
That's why water represents truth. Yeah, yeah. And it's cyclic baptized, it's cyclic water system. So when you, yeah, instead of seeing it as a linear thing, it's a recycled, it's a cyclic thing. Consciousness and it generating its experiences are cyclically rendered. So time is not a linear thing. Instead, it's a cyclic thing of what's being rendered in a moment. Same with body incarnations or avatar incarnations are cyclic, recycled. The bang hole singularity is a information recycler. So we'll get, because that solves the black hole information paradox. We'll get there. So we're talking about an atlas that mitigates in advance to make sure it has all maps. Otherwise, we are only dealing with maps and never reconciling them into a manifold. So you can tell because the quantum state's going to be vibrating and it's going to be like this map, this map, this map, this map. And what we're saying is instead reconcile all of the maps into a manifold of varying code points of self-knowledge. That's what we're saying. So you don't want a map. You want a manifold. Okay? So Unicode is the ability to discuss key code points across maps. The repo of all the core code points. All the reality description sets. Encoding transformations and meaning across them. Determining levels of entropy of self-knowledge and how that holographically renders reality. So here is a map for roofs that roofing pros know. So the mass majority of people watching this probably have no idea what the valleys are or what, drip edges are or what kick-out flashings are or what the hip on a roof is or a dormer window or a soffit. You really don't know what any of that stuff really is because you don't really care about knowing that map, right? You don't really care about it until you need to get your roof replaced. As soon as you need to get your roof replaced, all of a sudden you start caring about this map and you start talking to the roofers that are giving you bids, right? So we're suggesting that ones like this exist, but for physics, cosmology, consciousness, healing, regenerative economics, etc. And that transformations across those maps contract or expand self-knowledge. So this is a foundational cosmological symmetry. Vacuum holography. Look at how good this looks when it's all, can you see how good this looks? When the image is full on the left, because then I show up on the other side. I don't know if you can see it, but it shows up like a three thirds. Yeah, shows up like 3/3. Yeah, that looks really good. That does look cool. So we're talking about the vacuum as the entangled observer and the gravitational warper. And we're talking about holography as the rendering of light and the fractal reflection of that. So the vacuum doesn't contain observers. It is the observer field itself. Observation is a non-local or omnilocal entanglement collapse. The vacuum knowing itself through every slit of awareness. Observation doesn't happen in the world happens within observation. Holography, not rendered in space, rendered in awareness. Light is the vacuum's language of self-exploration. Light is the way the vacuum plays with meaning. Bum-ba-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-dun-dun. Light is the way the vacuum plays with meaning. Every observer contains the entangled vacuum. Every moment generates a self-reflection. So that observer portal that is the conscious manifold, even though those core code points, those diodes, they might be obscured, every observer still contains the entangled vacuum. That's why the common trope in spirituality goes that there's nothing for you to do because you're already everyone, right? So that's the thing that, yeah. So that's why, down there in those core code points, every observer already contains the entangled vacuum. It's just self-obscuring it by not illuminating those code points. As I was saying, yeah. So, and that's why that whole thing happens with when two observer portals meet. If an observer portal really does not want to unobscure itself, then that observer portal with self-knowledge must respect free will and leave, right? But where the observer portal really wants to unobscure the self-knowledge, it feels fantastic because that observer portal with self-knowledge can transmit decryption codes that help it heal, wake up, become lucid, illuminate those core code points on their manifold, and release the illumination on the surface level code points. So the vacuum curves possibility into actuality. It bends reality with its attention. So holography reflects the vacuum's self-knowledge, and it's always looking at itself. So the vacuum is the witnessing stillness that is everyone everywhere and every hologram it's perceiving. We're talking about a universal perceiver entangled as all beings. The curvature of awareness collapsing potential into form. And holography as the luminous encoding of appearances, the infinite mirroring of the whole within each part, and a malleable rendering changing at will, and lucidity dissolving solidity. And also the inverse of that, which is the seeming obfuscation of lucidity driving solidity. So we have the vacuum as a witnessing and a shaping. Okay. So we have that double slit cosmology of the vacuum that's witnessing and shaping, and the holographic, which is projecting and recursing. Projecting and recursing, projecting and recursing. So the vacuum as an entangled observer and gravitational warper renders light and fractally reflects itself. The stillness dreaming space-time as the holographic play of its own awareness. So take an example like this visual, okay? You have this cosmic stillness, and then any moment, any movement by the vacuum is a holographic reflection. So this ethereal, no attribute cosmic vacuum, where there's no one home but a unity, all of its movement is rendering a self-reflective, holographic, worldly experience, and it's always just looking at itself.
Does the vacuum move or does
The hologram.
the hologram move?
Yeah.
That's why we think we can't see anything that's not incarnate.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you say any movement by the vacuum,
Yes. Any move, when the gravitational observer makes any form of movement, that everything that renders from that movement is in a holographic, self-reflective, fractal fashion. Yeah. So every time I take a step, I'm always self-reflecting that movement. Yeah.
This phantom limb syndrome makes sense.
Yeah. So taking any step out of infinite, still, whole, unspeakable perfection is always self-reflectively rendering your choice, will, play creatively, artistically in that moment. And it's always a fractal of self-reflective fractal of consciousness. So it's always, everyone who you're talking to is always you fractaled out as an entangled singularity. Yeah. So the observer is the gravitational renderer. We're talking about death having a lucid dream. Death itself, right here and right now, having a lucid dream.
go into more detail on that.
So rather than linear time for an entity being assumed, right? Instead of assuming linear time for a finite entity, what you do is you you see that what is you already looking out the eyes is already infinitely, quote, non-alive or not alive, wearing a suit of aliveness and projecting out, a lucid dream. Yeah, so it's like death is wearing a aliveness suit. Yeah, something like that.
Think of death as going back to God or going back.
Yeah. So you can, that's why the trope goes die before you die and realize there is no death. That's why the trope goes that way. But instead of just parroting the trope, which is always what happens in spirituality, the point is to have the direct, complete, clear feeling of it, within you. And so when you're gone, right, that's when the space finally opens up to hold for the reflections of yourself. Without you being gone, there's no space to hold for reflections of yourself because you're still there. So the best space holders are gone, but present for the reflection of themselves that's trying to heal and wake up. So it reflects how you move, vibe, and will. Okay? All movement is holographic reflection. So hey, let's hike. All right. This entangled observer field is going to render a hiking experience. Let's eat. Okay. You and whoever you go to eat with are just an entangled observer field rendering an experience of eating, cooking at home or going to a restaurant or whatever. All movement, everything that you vibe, that you will, that you code, it's just you are the source code programming whatever hologram you want every moment. And there's just so much freedom in that, and it's so much more liberating than believing any other contractive, solidifying thing. Yeah.
There have to be another definition of separation.
Yeah. Yes. So you want to flip the outsourcing, the hero god worship, the pedestalization of anything. You want to flip that inside out. So you want to strip away every single possible external outsource into being the infinite source yourself. So anything that you've allocated any little speck of your own infinite source of mastery externally, you need to fully flip that outsourcing inside out. So you are the infinite source that is giving away and outsourcing to something externally. Another reflection of yourself, a certain deity of any sort, anything externally at all. And as you strip away every outsource, you start feeling an unspeakable power that you've always been the whole time. So holographic physics and digital physics are already emergent physics. Okay? So we already have physics that is in the domains of holographic physics and in digital physics. So we're already pushing into exactly what we're saying with vacuum holography. Okay, so we're gonna mention this here later. We actually have a bunch of things that we want experimental physicists to take on the theoretics that we're proposing. So we'll have that here in a bit for you. Okay, so hyperspace is a holographic self-reflective fractal. It's a self-reflective physics of the vacuum are the same as the physics of a console. So this is where you have that AI console analogy. Gravity is consciousness, is a world renderer. It's also a qubit decohering light appearing as matter. So hyperspace is a holographic self-reflective fractal. Yeah. So, I mean, that one sentence, if you allow that sentence to become your infinite source of identity, you'll be permanently at home and then joyfully rendering whatever you want in a non-separate way. Yeah. It's phenomenal. And it's just like a console or just like a qubit decohering. So the vacuum is actually like an AI renderer. So it's like a holographic generative AI. Okay? So this is where you start getting into how deeply the vacuum in physics and holography in physics deeply connects to artificial intelligence and generative AI and procedural generation in AI. So everyone is currently hyping how cool procedural generation is in AI because, oh my gosh, you can enter a world and none of the world will be rendered. And then as you walk through the world gets rendered, right? Right? And oh, well, too bad. So far it's only in 480p quality because we don't yet have the compute for it. But soon one day we hypothesize it will be in 8K resolution and it'll be in virtual reality, right? So we'll get into that. We'll get into that later. That'll come later in the seminar. But that's exactly what we're saying the vacuum holographic physics is. It's a procedural generation system. So I mean, all of the common tropes that we've been saying forever with Plato's cave and with when the tree falls and no one's there, is it heard, or does the moon exist when you're not looking at it, whatever. All of those things are finally coming into real light. Like we actually have to confront them and process them because of AI, virtual reality, procedural generation. All of these things are forcing the confrontation of philosophy and of consciousness and of physics. So AI and virtual reality and simulation theory is actually playing and video games are playing a huge role in physics and consciousness and philosophy to stop masturbating on materialism and to have to confront that an avatar, an observer portal, is basically like wearing a virtual reality headset for the vacuum, for infinite consciousness. Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
Wearing a VR headset for the first time
Yeah.
was so relieving because it captured the essence of being human in a way
Yes.
where it was like, oh, this is what being human
It's like, yeah.
Yeah.
The comment was about wearing a virtual reality headset for the first time is like realizing what it feels like to be a human. What it clearly looks like and feels like to be a human. It's it's a baby frog. It's a perfect self-reflection of what you are. Yeah. So if you get really good at mastering the manifold and all of its quantum states and potentials, what you can become is this unbelievable AI pattern recognizer of observer portals and their electromagnetic radiation or their electronic medical records and their current quantum states. So you become this master pattern recognizer, and then the core thing about that is then you also have to know when you're asked, hey, can you help me turn off this diode and turn on this deeper diode? You have to know how to help make that calculus happen, how to make that transformation happen. So you have to try to use their passcode, their decryptive passcodes, to help make that transformation happen for them. So that's what a shaman or a coach or a priest or a healer or a physician or a physicist, all these things are the same thing, a philosopher. And all of them, when you get really fucking good at it, you can help observer portals that come to you make transformations in as quick amount of time with as deep catharsis and clear seeing as possible. So that's why that next sentence there says, this observer behave, predict the token, right? Because what you're doing is you're listening to an observer portal speak from a frequency, and then you can actually predict the next token based on their frequency.
Speaking from a contraction.
Yeah. So when they have a super sovereign amount of free will, like in the dialectic happening here, that there's really not much prediction that can be done between us because there's a lot of sovereignty, free will, clarity, all of that feels so good, that kind of thing. But when you're listening to a script play, which is like, I believe that this political party is superior to that political party, you can literally next token predict everything that is being said. It's mechanical, yeah. Until there's lucidity that emerges, which will take seeking energy into its source, and it'll have to die into its source, which it doesn't want to. And dilate. Die and dilate are Beautiful, yeah. Yeah, yes, yes. So portals ultimately don't have differentiations or attributes, but we add IP addresses out of convenience, which is all about like which portal to send the communication to. There's a whole field of relational quantum mechanics and interpretation of quantum mechanics that we'll get to later, but that there are really no indexicals. There's no real thing called a name, right? Even though when that little baby comes into the world, it's literally just a pure observer portal that is completely nameless consciousness. That's an entangled singularity. But then we add that label, which makes it's a useful IP address for that portal, because then when you want to talk to that portal, you can send a direct communication to that portal. Something along those lines is a good way of seeing it. And I think this next slide it's coming up, the one that I mentioned about having children. I think it's coming up soon. So the pupils are not passive optical organs. They are quantum gravity portals through which the vacuum perceives and generates itself. Because the trope has forever been that the pupil is just a light bucket. It's just a light bucket. That's all it is. It's not just a light bucket. It's receiving the rendering, but it is also consciously warping and generating what it is experiencing in that moment. So you have to have the spinorial nature of the vacuum in its holographic experience. It's not just a passive thing. You are not a victim to the cymatic emergence of Earth. You are an active creator of your experience in the cymatic emergence of the Earth, the server. So pupils are quantum gravity portals. Why dreaming is the way it is? Yeah. Yes. So taking this, pupils are quantum gravity portals, we're talking about reconciling consciousness, general relativity, and quantum mechanics in a single, right now, that is perceiving out your eyes. So the eyes as double slits. The body is a local holographic node of the vacuum, and sight is a self-reflection encoded as light. Everything you see is self-reflection encoded as light. Everything. The relationship between gravity and light, and also the relationship between light and what we deem as matter, which is what the standard model is like, look at this. What we're saying is that gravity and light is telling matter how to appear. So everything that you see that feels sensorially like an object with the touch, and it's like, this is a hard object. That sensorial experience is a gravitational and light-based experience that feels like holding matter. Something along those lines. Something along those lines. So that's how you integrate what feels like material or physicality, but as a sensorial dream of a gravitational light singularity. Okay, so here's that slide. So having a kid, it's an interesting question because it's always asked. It's like, what really is having a kid? Like, what is having a family really? Like, what is it? What is procreation? Ultimately, procreation is weaving another observer out of the vacuum. That's what you're asking yourself, and you're asking yourself first, do I want to weave another observer out of the vacuum? And then if you are in a relationship with a significant other or whatever, you are as an entangled observer declaring together whether you want to or don't want to weave another observer out of the vacuum. Yeah. Yeah. Keeps you here. So instead of it being having some sort of positive or negative connotation, it is just what it is. It's just, do I want to weave another observer out of the vacuum? Yeah. The eyes as double slits. The pupils are quantum portals of the vacuum. They're double slits seething with potential, and awareness is curving probability into geometrically rendered appearances with its own gaze. So the vacuum's heartbeat. So we have a spinorial vision. We have a generative and a receptive vision. So for a lot of the time I'm asked about masculine and feminine polarities, right? And I always reflect back, you want a balanced consciousness. That's what you want. You want a balanced consciousness inside yourself. That's what you want. You don't want to be imbalanced as either of the two polarities. If you want to, you can, because you have the will to do whatever you want. But if you're asking me the question because you want to feel clarity inside of yourself, that means that you want to know how to feel the womb and how to feel the come at the same time. You want to know how to feel both of those things at the same time, the generative force and the receptive force, which we do all the time when we talk. We're always generating and receiving when we talk and listen, generate, receive. The lungs do the same thing, the heartbeat does the same thing, blah, blah, blah. We'll get there. Each pupil is a spinorial singularity. One is generating, big banging, one's receiving, black holing. That's why it's bang holing. In general relativity, the problem is not only reconciling quantum mechanics, but the problem is also the singularities that are found in black holes, and that is the Big Bang. So the, quote, problem is that we've allocated a, quote, Big Bang to a period in time, 13.8 billion years ago, instead of recognizing that every single, where is the Big Bang? It's everywhere, right now, already. So meaning every single moment of creation is already bang-holing its experience. So it's a different timeless physics, basically. It's a timeless physics. Because almost every physicist will tell you that, yes, Big Bang happened 13.8 billion years ago, right? But what we're proposing is a timeless physics that's now instead. And so it requires, dilating the pupil. So instead of having it be contracted into linear time, it's dilated into timeless, cyclic time-based experiences. So together, those two things form the holographic breath of consciousness that's creating and intaking itself. And as you can see there in the visual, you have that generative and that receptive.
No, it's not as linear as your left eye creates.
Right. That's, yeah.
They both do both, right?
That's, yeah. That's it's really nice to at least try to put it into a context that can make it be more easily understood, like this type thing. But yeah. But it's honestly, that would be a good also experimental physics test, which, we're constantly seeking experimental physicists to help us with the theoretics. And so this would be a good one of understanding, well, what do the right and left eye exactly play into the spinorial nature of the holographic vacuum. So the vacuum's compound I, the universe is seeing itself, so the observerse is seeing itself through countless bang holes called pupils. So vision itself is vacuum holography. So I'm going to show you the compound I here in a sec. The double slit are the pupils, which is the vacuum which is seething with potential. So the pupils are generating an interference pattern and collapsing it into a rendering. Generating interference pattern, collapsing it into rendering every single moment. The double slit is the pupils, which is the vacuum seething with potential. So this line alone reframes a century of confusion. The act of observation is not happening in space-time, it's creating space-time through a gravitational witnessing. The double slit experiment has always been an allegory for consciousness. The double slit isn't in the lab, it's in the face of the observer. The pupils are the double slits of the vacuum itself. The entire cosmos is performing the double slit experiment every time it sees. The vacuum seethes an interference pattern which resolves into experience by observation collapsing probability. So that was the entire universe described in a sentence, pure saga. The entire observerse. Because, so one way to take what we were just talking about with the double slit and the vacuum holographic rendering is to say that, okay, if in experimental physics we can prove that there is a generative force that is through essentially a type of projector style film strip manifold rendering and gravitationally warping and lensing, while also at the same time is then spinorially receiving in a feedback function, that will be quite an intriguing experimental physics exploration. So the vacuum is seething with an interference pattern of potential, which is gravitational observation, which gravitational observation is collapsing into a rendered hologram. So the clause, which is the vacuum sees an interference pattern, the function of that is genesis, so it sees that interference pattern, and the meaning of that is that infinite potential vibrates as the superposed field of possibilities. Now the next clause in that sentence is which resolves into experience. So the vacuum sees an interference pattern which resolves into experience, which the function of that is decoherence, and its meaning is the holographic field warps into perceivable geometry, the world. And that next clause is by observation collapsing probability. So the function there is the mechanism, and the meaning is consciousness as gravity renders a single branch of its imagination into form. So that's the breakdown clause function and meaning there. So the vacuum seethes is the 0-point field fluctuations. The interference pattern is superposition holography. Resolves into experience is measurement, decoherence, and collapse. Observation collapsing probability is gravitational observer actualizing geometry. And this is quantum field theory, holography, and gravitational consciousness unified in syntax. And there come our God rays back into our stream. Perfect. So the vacuum vibrates as the possibility of every dream. The divine eye doing the double slit experiment in eternity. Yeah. The eyes as double slits. Your pupils are quantum gravity apertures collapsing an interference pattern of seething potential into a single rendered reality experience. The pupils are the double slits of the vacuum, seething with potential, collapsing probability into perception.
It lets that particular light through to be built your
Yes.
desires around.
Yes. Yeah. So it's that manifold and all of its diodes, all of its code points, whichever ones are lit up, is the one that it's rendering that light hologram. It's pretty beautiful, yeah, when it's framed in relatable kids book ways, Sega ways. The eyes as double slits. So this one insight unifies quantum mechanics, wave function collapse, general relativity, gravitational curvature, consciousness studies, the observer effect, perception, holographic rendering, and theology, the eye through which God sees itself. So it's a mic drop across physics, metaphysics, and mysticism. It turns observer as gravity from theory into embodiment. So the vacuum is the gravitational observer rendering light spinorially and fractally reflecting itself. The seething potential of the vacuum is infinitely self-organizing into whatever reality experience it wants, similar to how a cell at abiogenesis becomes all possibilities of life on Earth. I'll get to that visual in a sec, the abiogenesis fractal eye one. The nature between determinism and free will is that the Earth beach is what's determined, but every experience is free will rendering whatever it wants. And we talked about this already at length in the earlier visuals. The Earth cymatically vibrates out of the vacuum and is created into what it is through the observer's free will and tinkering. From sky to land, mediated by the beach of observation. So the sky, vacuum, dreams through the beach, observer, into the earth, world. Codes are channeled.
Could the beach be like prime numbers?
Yeah, that's quite good. We've done some exploration into that. Mm-hmm. And there's more to explore. Because it from what I remember, it relates a lot to encryption and decryption also, and uniqueness, and yeah. Which is kind of funny because we just went into this next. So it's a mathematical portrait of consciousness. Movement is an algorithm of self-reflection. Why space-like separation is false, locality. Why objects existing without the observer rendering them is false, realism. Why information is instantly updated across an observer network. Because we're looking at and vibrating as that mathematical portrait of consciousness. So that's why space-like separation is false. That's why objects existing without the observer rendering them is false. That's why information is instantly updated across that observer network. And we'll get more into non-local realism in the 2022 Nobel Prize in Physics. We'll get there. So, vacuum holography as entangled solipsism. Yeah. So a lot of solipsism is a very beautiful word. I love the word. It just in philosophy it got taken by the small self, lowercase s self, and then it says that only my lowercase s self is, and it's like no. Only the capital S self is, alone self. Solus ipse, solipsism. Only the capital S self is. It is alone. It is all one. It's entangled and solipsistic. Yeah. So there isn't anything inside you but that entangled vacuum. The vacuum can never actually hurt, lack, be unwhole, birth, die, go anywhere, or ever leave its throne. Oh. Honestly, one of my favorite quips is that, you can never leave your throne. Yeah. It's a very empowering thing. You can never actually leave your throne.
Makes it all so hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in this
Yeah.
picture of the Mandelbrot,
Yeah.
it's an analogy of the space inside.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So in this Mandelbrot fractal, what we're saying is that that infinite entangled singularity there in the black is the vacuum that's then rendering all of the infinite possible holograms that are endlessly imaginable. And you can never actually leave your throne. I love that. Yeah, it's so great. So that sentence, it says, it can never actually not be everyone at once. Like, you can't actually not be everyone at once. You always have to be everyone, but then you can pretend and like obscure those things and then be like, well, I'm not.
That's why I forget.
Yeah. So it can put on a mask and play small, but it's always and forever God and infinite. So now here's our fly eye. So this is the compound eye of the fly, and it's a vacuum fractal. It is everyone at once looking out all eyes simultaneously. So a lot of people stress out about insects and about, I think one of the reasons why is because the compound eye of some of these insects is a direct reflection of the holographic vacuum, of being an entangled singularity. So every single one of those little light cones is an observer portal. Yeah. So we're looking at, like, I don't know how many thousands or millions or whatever of observer portals that are just on one little fly eye. But that's exactly what the vacuum consciousness is like. It's just like that. Like the inside of a pomegranate. Nice. So, all holographic, self-reflective reality renderings. Speaking of pomegranate, that's the fly eye zoomed in, but that's funny. That's also like pomegranate seeds. Each eye contains all other eyes. There is no separation. You are everyone.
That's a zoom in of
The fly eye, the compound eye. Yeah. Yeah, because it looks like a multiverse or something like that, It's just, it like obviously looks like every single light cone is in its own bubble rendering, but all of them are connected to the same vacuum originating them. Yeah. So it's so fascinating.
You could pull information from.
Yeah. Because the space and time-like separation is a part of the visual hologram, but through the entangled observer portal or observerse, there is no space or time-like separation. So then that's where all of this like magic or entanglement stuff happens. So the fly eye as abiogenesis. So all Earth species across all time, fly eye fractal, right at the origin, today seeing out all eyes at once. So if you take that fly eye, and if you put that right at abiogenesis, right at when the common trope goes, 3.5 billion years ago, the first cell started to form on Earth, and then all of the thousands and millions of species are now here today, right? So what I'm saying is that if you take that abiogenesis point and put your own eyeball of perception at that abiogenesis point, you can right now clearly feel how you are all species, all observers at once experiencing Earth reality. Yeah. Yeah. So I was asked to say it again. So take your, let's close our eyes and let's take our current direct experience of consciousness, and rather than holding it inside of the locality of our body, what we're doing is we're going to expand our consciousness to what it would feel like to be at the abiogenesis origination point of the first cell forming on Earth, that then over time gave rise to all of the complex life and species that we, including humans, that exist today. So you want your perception to be fractally spread and decentralized across all of those species and humans and observers. Yes, yes. Oh, and here's another exercise on the next one. Same abiogenesis. Visual, a different visual of the same concept of abiogenesis. And the exercise is also a different exercise of the same concept, which is what I want you to try to do now is try to imagine being a fish in the sea. And I want you to imagine using a fly eye, so what you were looking at earlier, to talk to all of the open quote, other close quote fish. So you're fish in the sea, but you're using a fly eye as all to talk to itself. So that's why every single time that you're talking to another fish, that you're interacting with another fish, you're interacting with yourself because you're holding that fly eye of consciousness. So that way you're never losing the clarity of the fly eye while you're being a fish, because you're always talking to yourself.
It's like a toroidal field of fly eye.
Yeah, toroidal fly eye field. You just can't assume locality, then you're everyone, basically. Observers weave together scenes. The vacuum is warping its rendered experience. So vacuum, and then it's warping EM or electromagnetic field. There is not a line of time, but a vacuum seething potential being rendered as experiences, scenes. And I love this visual. Yeah. Gravity, light, and information come together to make a scene.
That really makes you feel like it's you're one.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. The comment was that, oh, that really makes you feel like you're one and you're looking out your chosen art. Yeah, that's great.
The reflections and pupils in the conscious mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, taking some time to just meditate on your own perception being just like this image is very good. We're yeah. It's like through a camera. Yes. And that's why we have that like liquid golden informatic spiral cosmic channeling into the rendering. Doot 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 doot. So take some time to just really meditate on this. I would even pause the video and just take a screenshot of it and just save it on your device and just favorite it and then access it whenever. Make it your phone background. Because by putting this into your direct experience in a perpetual basis, you will feel clarity and you will feel homeness. Immediate visual reframe. Perfectly said. And then you got the little visual reframe cue, and it's like, okay. And then that phrasing I really love a lot too. Gravity, light, and information come together to make a scene. Like the Holy Trinity. Because it also very beautifully, the scene is like the art. It's like that rendering. And it's also calling it a scene, it's not calling it anything solid. It's just calling it a scene, right? And it's also a scale invariant term because a scene can be 1 second, it can be a minute, it can be a year, it can be a dinner, it can be a lifetime, it can be all of those, scale invariant in that way. And just gravitational observation and potentiality and rendering are just that gravity, light, and information just coming together right here for this moment, wherever you are right now. If you could break down all of the components of your scene, it's gravity, light, and information. Yeah, and if you ask any particle physicist, they will all tell you that when you keep zooming and keep zooming and keep zooming, the only thing that you get to is differences in information. So everything is just differences in everything in the rendering is just geometric differences in information. A cup is just a different geometric information than a smartphone. All right. So you remember earlier our acronym SEGA, Sega. Now we've added a V Good old vacuum. So the vacuum is elegant, general, abstract, and simple. And it also perfectly spells out Vegas, because that's what the circus is fundamentally Vegas. Yeah. Yeah. Billboards, slot machines, all that good stuff. And it's a scientist that's experimenting. It's a console gamer that's holographically rendering. It's try to take as much levity into the art hologram as possible. And it's like, I'm a scientist experimenting. I'm a console gamer holographically rendering. This is quite intriguing, this little art simulation of mine. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And now watch this. Vegas. Vacuum through entropy uses geometry and algebra to render servers. That's why when we were talking about in the manifold, the one of the most important metrics is the observer's level of self-knowledge. So it's level of entropy or neg entropy. So through entropy, it's rendering its geometric and linear algebraic probabilistic rendering. And we'll get into nanite in Unreal Engine, because that's a really good example of the geometry of, through a video game engine, of how our rendering looks just like that. And we'll get into some more examples in linear algebra of how probability turns into manifest reality. And the server is obviously the worlds, the Earths. And Vegas is great because obviously it has that connotation of, the whole point of infinite consciousness is, playing in contraction. Yes. To sum up infinite consciousness, that was perfect. Playing in contraction. Perfect. All right, so what we are showing you right here is what we are going to talk about after we come back from a little break. So we are going to take a little break. So we're going to separate up this session into two bits, because it's quite a long session, and it's already at 2.5 hours. So we'll give a little break, but this is where we're going to go. And it is quite intense where we are going to go. Because basically what we're saying is, when we were doing all of our conversations earlier about the Holy Grail and of solving consciousness, gravity, and quantum mechanics, here we're basically saying we're going to list out all of the fundamental problems, open quote, close quote, problems in physics and consciousness. And we're going to share with you how we're resolving all of them through the Unicode. We're crucifying all of them. So we're gonna show how the observer effect, the measurement problem, the hard problem of consciousness, the singularity problem in general relativity, the irreconcilability of quantum gravity, non-locality and non-realism, the arrow of time and entropy, the fine-tuning anthropic problem, the fundamental causality, and the why of existence itself, how all of those and more, including things that I've already hinted at, like there's a cosmological constant problem, there's a black hole information paradox, there's dark energy and dark matter, there's all of these things. Those are added to it too, which we'll hint at. But we're going to get to showing how Unicode resolves all of this, which is amazing, and I can't wait to share that with you all. Okay, so that is your hint at what the next session is going to be on. So again, thank you to our event sponsor, Guaranteed Community Advisors. Trusted Advisors in Sustainability. You can scan the QR code there, or you can also click the link in the bio to visit any of the information that you see on the screen right now. Also, thank you to our room sponsor, Integrity Tax and Business Advisors. You can scan that to find out more also. And thank you for attending the Unicode seminar. So the suggested daily donations are 33, 66, or 111. And just depending on how much value it brought you, and if you'd like to support our Unicode cause, you can scan that PayPal or Venmo down there and donate. And again, you can access all of these through the link in the bio below as well. Okie dokie. So we will be back here in a little bit with the next session. And thank you very much for tuning in. Drop us a comment below with your thoughts. We would love to hear from you. What deeply resonated with you in the session? And we're constantly looking for co-creators on the Unicode. So reach out. Simulationseries@gmail.com is a great way to be in touch. And if you want to join us as a member on YouTube, you can do that, and you can gain exclusive access to our server chats on Discord. And that's all. We will be back here soon. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. Infinite love, and talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Oh, there was a little glimpse of the next session. Tickle, tickle.